Hi guys, Adam here, also known as Gamer Abroad, coming to you on my gaming channel, Gaming Abroad, and today I want to give you a guide on the Dwarf Team in Blood Bowl 3. Dwarves are one of the slowest teams in Blood Bowl 3, but they're really good for the type of player that enjoys positioning and enjoys the slow grind of moving the ball down the field. You're not going to do anything flashy with the Dwarves, such as throwing the ball, or doing a handoff, or jumping over anybody, or even doing a neat little fumble-rooski. And because of those reasons, that's why it's rated as a 1-star for the mastery required. It's a very, very easy team to take up. And to be fair, I have seen some very high ranked players in the ladder playing Dwarves, so I think Dwarves are actually a very viable team. The first thing I'm going to show you guys about the Dwarves is the rosters. There's a couple rosters that I like. Dwarves are one of those teams where you can take advantage of the team value, and this roster is a very, very balanced roster that I'm about to show you, and you can take advantage of having a low team value and hopefully get a little inducements by doing something like this. We're going to add 1 runner, 2 blitzers, and then we're going to even the rest off with 8 linemen. That'll bring you up to 11 players. With that kind of money, you can add 3 rerolls and 5 dedicated fans. And you see how it costs $995,000, but the team value itself is actually $955,000 due to the dedicated fans not counting as part of the team value. One thing you can do, you can also get an apothecary early on. I've seen this roster before. I do not recommend it. I think you should go with the rerolls. 2 rerolls is not enough. To be fair, 3 rerolls is not enough. So 3 rerolls is better than 2 in an apothecary. Dwarves are a very stout and sturdy team. They all have the thick skull trait, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So this is one roster. If you really like the death roller, here is one way you can add the death roller. Personally, I think it's a bad idea, but if you were to do so, this is what it would look like. We're going to keep the 8 Dwarven blockers. We're going to remove both blitzers. We're going to instead add another runner. Now we can afford the death roller. So this is what the team looks like with 11 players and a death roller. I personally wouldn't go for this roster because at exactly 11 players, you're going to be at 10 at one point because the death roller is only allowed to be on the field for 1 drive because it's going to get fouled out unless you want to find a way to get some bribes or something. Death rollers are a little hard to deal with early on and they're incredibly expensive. If you wanted to make up for the fact that he will get removed from the field, it's going to cost you some rerolls. If I take away 1 reroll, that's not even enough to buy another player, so unfortunately I have to take down 1 more reroll, and then you can get a Slayer or a Blitzer. It's your choice, but I personally don't like this roster. I'm going to show you guys my favorite roster. I believe this is the roster you guys should go for. This roster is going to include 1 Troll Slayer, 2 Blitzers, which is the max amount of Blitzers you can get, 2 Runners, which is the max amount of runners you can get. Then we're going to fill out the roster with the rest with linemen, and 6 of those will bring you up to 11 players. And with this, you can actually afford your 3 rerolls, which I think is a good way to start. Another option to do would be to remove a reroll and bring up some dedicated fans. That way you can generate some income. However, I would rather go with the reroll and try to win some games. But then again, the more I think about it, generating income is a good idea. So you can kind of go back and forth on this. I think this is the best roster. If you guys are going to start with the Dwarves, this is the one I recommend the most. Now let's take a look at the players themselves. Let's start with the Blitzer. Taking into consideration of the last roster I showed you, even though this dwarf is called a Blitzer, I wouldn't actually use them as a Blitzer. So in that case, I would actually give this one Mighty Blow, Guard, and Stand Firm. Another thing to consider is dwarves work really good with the guard skills. You might want to consider, instead of giving one of the Blitzers Stand Firm, give them Guard instead. You're going to be giving Guard to a lot of the Dwarven linemen, so it's going to be helpful to also have the Blitzer as Guard. Guard is a very powerful skill in Blood Bowl 3. It makes it so this player offers no offensive or defensive assists, no matter how many players are marking him, which is actually very handy with the death roller, because now the death roller is essentially a fouling or killing machine if you have a lot of players with guard around. Now let's look at the next player. Let's look at the dwarf blocker lineman. Now these are your meat shields. You're going to have the most of these guys, and these guys come with block, thick skull, and tackle. Actually, let me talk about thick skull a little bit. All the dwarves come with thick skull, and this was what makes them very, very resilient. Not only do they have an armor value of 10, but should the armor value actually be tested and penetrated, it's actually harder to get them off the field due to the thick skull. And these guys come with block, which is an essential skill for body-to-body contact, and interesting enough, it comes with tackle already, so it makes a dwarf blocker lineman out the gate already a very, very good player. So as you start leveling these guys up, as I was talking about earlier, you're going to give them guard, because guard works very well with dwarves. I mean, they already come with block, they already come with tackle, so next thing you're going to want to do is guard, then Mighty Blow. Stand Firm is good. If you don't like Stand Firm, you can go defensive. which is unfortunately a secondary skill. It's a good skill because during the turn of your opponent, any player marked by the player cannot use his guard skill. So it's good for counteracting other players that overdo it on guard, which you should be overdoing it on guard as a Dwarven coach. All right, let's go back and look at the Death Roller. Death Roller is actually a pretty interesting player. For one, I just want to bring up the fact that it has the secret weapon, and I talked about this a little bit earlier. When a drive involving this player comes to an end, he is sent off for having committed a foul. So unless you successfully contest that foul or you want to get a lot of bribes, Death Rollers are actually very, very hard to keep on the field. So this is why I don't recommend starting with a Death Roller, because it's hard to get yourself up to 12 players unless you really want to work with 10 players and all drives but one. One thing that's also very interesting to note about the Death Roller, he has Dirty Player +2. Unfortunately, he has Loner +5, so it's really hard to get a reroll on these guys. He's got no hands, so he can't take possession of the ball in any action. He's very, very hard to dodge away from because he comes with break tackle. He also comes with Juggernaut, which says when this player performs a block during a blitz, he can choose to consider a both down result as a pushed back. But more interesting, under these same conditions, the target of the block cannot use fend, stand firm, or the wrestle skills. So that's a very handy skill. If you're going to take a Death Roller, which you probably will later on, but I don't recommend it. As I said from the beginning, you're going to want to give him these skills. If you want to be super cheesy, I would actually take Sneaky Get with your Death Roller because it's in a combo really good with his starting skills, Dirty Player +2. Another great skill to take would be Diving Tackle, which makes it all the more hard for an opponent to get away from you because, well, he's got a strength of a 7, an armor value of 11, so that opponent's not going to be attacking him. So if you're next to the guy that has the ball, he's going to want to dodge away. And if you have the Diving Tackle skill, that's going to make it even more difficult for him to dodge away with that ball. But if you don't want to go those routes, you can take the traditional guard and, of course, block. Every player that has body-to-body contact should have the block skill. Now let's take a look at the runners. The runners are going to be your ball handlers. They have sure hands. They have thick skull just like every other dwarf on the team. And because of the sure hand skill and the fact that they have movement 6, the first skill I would consider taking on a Dwarven runner would be Passing Tree, and that would be on the ball. Speaking of passing, I know I'm a little all over the place here. The Dwarves are not a good passing team. You're not going to see any good stats for Dwarves in the passing category. I said this early on in the video, I just want to remind you. But take on the ball first. I highly recommend this because this will give you an additional 3 extra movements to get closer to that ball during kickoff, which will essentially allow you to get your Dwarven runner into the cage quicker. After that, you have 2 choices on which skills to pick next, but I highly recommend picking both of them. The order that you choose is up to you. One of those is right here on this tree, and that would be Leader. It's always great to have a cheap team value reroll for your entire team. The second skill you're going to want to take, or first skill depending on the order in which you want to take them, would be Block, just to protect them a little bit. Now let's back out and take a look at the last player on the Dwarven team, and that would be the Troll Slayer. The Troll Slayer comes with Block, which is great, and also comes with Dauntless. And this is a very cool skill, and probably why it's called the Troll Slayer, because Troll is a very, very high strength creature. They have a strength of 5, so with the skill Dauntless, essentially what you can do is when you attempt a block or a blitz on a target whose strength is higher than his own, before any assists, but after other modifiers, a d6 result is added to the strength of the player. For example, if you were going against a troll, which has a strength of 5, and this guy has a strength of 3, you would essentially need to roll a 2 or higher, and you would match its strength. So that's what makes this little tiny dwarf a Troll Slayer. He also comes with the Frenzy skill, which allows him to follow up on a pushback, which makes him a very, very deadly player. So because of that, I think the Troll Slayer should be the Blitzer on your team, and this is how you should outfit their skills. First skill you should go with is from the strength tree, and that would be Mighty Blow, so you can really, really hurt those players and take them off the field. The next 2 skills to consider would be Guard and Stand Firm. You could also might want to go into your secondary agility tree and take Defensive. That's a good way to do it too, or that's something to consider. However, it's going to cost you 12 star player points to do so. This is just a quick guide on how you could build and level a dwarf team. Unfortunately, I must admit to you, I have not played much dwarves, but I was taking a look at the ladder, and some of the top players happen to be dwarf players right now, and I found that very interesting, so I wanted to come in and explore the dwarves a little bit and bring you guys a little bit of a guide. I think this is a great guide to get you started on the dwarf team, and I'm actually thinking about leaning away from the orcs again and going back to the dwarves. I don't know, there's so many great teams on this game. I am just all over the place. If you guys would like to make a request for the next team guide I can bring you, I would love to hear it. I want to really thank you guys for sticking with me on my little YouTube channel. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. I really, really appreciate you guys coming out and watching this video and watching my other guys. Please watch some of my other videos. You guys are totally awesome. I appreciate you guys, and I hope you guys stay that way.